deliberations. Let me start by putting across a question to you, Dr. Mandaza. You spoke clearly about the dynamics of power and gave a term that the guerrillas are the ones that wield the power. We looked at pre-independence and post-independence. And right now, given where we are, the dynamics that we have in this country, in terms of where the power is sitting, what do you think needs to happen for us to transit to a point where we are able to comply with our own constitution, and we can come to a point where we are democratic enough to attract investments in the country? That would be my question to you. And to Dr. Mungai, I think as a starting point, you mentioned quite a number of things. There is a lot of goodwill, there are expectations, but you also realize that one of the key issues that you mentioned here is to do with internal capacity, therefore to attract either development aid or investments into the country. So how do we balance and what we do given where we are? You gave us a picture of low liquidity, virtual money being created, growing budget deficits. We have defaulted on the loans. And this speaks to absence of capacity to attract. So what we need to do. So over to you, Dr. Mandaza.
Thank you. Ordinarily, the era of guerrillas should be over, taking into account age and natural attrition. And indeed, the number of ex-combatants is about 3,000 now. So the role of status in the politics is disproportionate with the numbers. The leadership of the war veterans, the military, are the same people who were the leaders during the struggle. In fact, the Chiwenga, Shiri, they go back to Mkagao, 1975, 76, right through to the present day. There are very few of them, but as I said earlier, they are disproportionately powerful because of the position they hold in the state, in the military. And they've been holding those positions, notwithstanding constitutional provisions about their tenure. Under the Constitution, the Commander CDF Air Force is 2 terms of 5 years each. Yes, police, 2. I think Chiwenga came in 2003, so ordinarily he should have gone 2013. And Chuguri, I think, came in earlier than that. He's almost a life police commissioner. So ordinarily, as I said, so we have a very abnormal situation. And this goes back to 2008. I forgot to make the point. In 2008, the democratic process was punctuated in the sense that the military took over. The military and the Emerson Mnangagwa are the ones who subverted the outcome in 2008. Morgan Tsvangirai won, it's common knowledge now. And Mugabe conceded for 24 hours. When they came, the military said, oh look, we can do otherwise. And the otherwise was done. The rest is history. So if you want to look at the trajectory, one might say the first coup was 2008 actually. So as to your question, therefore, To the extent that the military or the comrades are disproportionately powerful in the society, to the extent they've used that history as a platform for their claim, for their entitlement, we have a problem. We have a problem, as I said in my presentation, a problem of how to transit to a democratic situation. Already 2008 takes place. Secondly, the new constitution 2013 is not being implemented. And now, in the midst of a would-be transformation in political and economic, the military has taken over. The question is, what will the Zimbabwean people do? What will the opposition do to ensure that we get back to constitutional and democratic governance? So far, it's very depressing, because the opposition leaders are all running around now, willy-nilly endorsing the coup under different terms and so on and so forth, and queuing up for jobs in the new government. So I have called them a complicit and an unobliging opposition. That's what we have in this country. Until you wake up, you will be under military rule for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Well, the question you asked about capacities, and I'm not going to answer it by telling what to do, but I think I'll answer it in a bit of a roundabout way. If you accept the UNDP definition of what capacity is, and the capacity is defined, one, as the ability of individuals, institutions, and society to do three things: to set objectives, to achieve them, and to solve problems. If you don't solve a problem, if you cannot move that water from there to here when I'm thirsty, it doesn't matter whether you tell me you have capacity or not, because you haven't solved my problem. So are you able to set individuals, institutions, and society, meaning Zimbabwe, able to set objectives, achieve them, and solve problems? And since problems are different, our problem with the debt is maybe $10 billion international debt, and maybe $4 or $5 billion domestic debt. The question is, can we actually set objectives how to deal with it, achieve them, and solve the problem? But that's the underlying problem, is not the debt. The debt is a consequence of things we have done. So really it's a question of changing it. So what are we going to have to change? I'm not Zimbabwean, so I can't tell you we're going to change. But I can certainly observe something I said to last week. I had the honor to talk to the Zimbabwe Council of Churches. Dr. Mtata asked me to go to talk to them about what I thought the church should do in this new Zimbabwe. Today I would consider myself being asked, what should business people do? I'm assuming most of the people are business people. This is what I said. I said when I left Washington in 2007 to come to Zimbabwe, I think the Congress lost the campus. The Congress lost the campus. They thought they had a direction they were going. Somewhere along the way, they lost the campus, and they are not founded. So, one, the Congress had to find the campus. And when I say the comrades, I don't mean the comrades who just went to the war. These comrades have been reproducing themselves. They talk about the third Chimurena. They talk about the fourth Chimurena. The people who are on the streets of the 18th, some of the young people are saying, we are now comrades too. So the idea of comradeship in Zimbabwe is a growing phenomenon. It's a group that introduces itself. These comrades have to find the compass of the direction they want to go. For the church, all I say to them is contribute by giving them a moral compass. The people here would say contribute by giving them the commercial compass. Hopefully, the comrades find their political compass, their developmental compass. The church provides them a moral compass. You provide them a commercial compass. Who knows? We might actually be able to figure a way of defining our problems, setting objectives, and achieving them, and actually being able to solve the problems out. I think the debt is not that big. It's big, but it's not that big. So if that is the issue, I would say, first of all, let's hear how you intend to actually reduce your consumption? How do you intend to adjust what you consume? But before you can consume, you must produce. Let's hear how you intend to increase production. And to me, for me as an African and a development worker, I'm really waiting to hear what the president says. We are actually going to address the question of sustainable production. Sustainable production, because only then can you figure out sustainable consumption and can you actually figure out a way of sorting out the problems we face. That's a bit of roundabout way to do, but please find the compass. I tell the comrades to find the compass.
Thank you, Dr. Mgai. We need to find the compass. We need to produce sustainably, but currently without a compass. It's quite a bit confusing. I'm going to invite 2 questions at a time to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for you to probe, comment, and get some more insights. Do we have enough mics in the house? You have 2 more. Just these 2. Okay. Questions? Okay, there's a question over there. Thank you very much. Just introduce yourself and kick on the question.
I'm Reverend Scott Mdawana from Millennium Academy close by. I just want to ask, you've talked about the coup, you've talked about the campus, democratic pillars, and a lot of other things. But after the coup, we've got a group of so-called cabal and criminals. Where are they? And what is the future with these guys? We look like we're ignoring them, like they have suddenly become extinct. And I heard some of them resurfaced in Parliament yesterday. What is the future of this group? Is it not going to form a banditry type of group that is going to haunt these comrades that do not have a campus? What's your comment on that?
Second question. Yes, comrade, I hope you have a campus.
People, where do we position ourselves? How do we start to play a part, in the decision making and the changes that are being tabled here? How do we bring that about? And what would you see or forecast in the next 15 years?
Thanks for that question. I think it brings hope. After all, what do you see in the future? I'll give the mic to you.
Mr. Joe, but it is not true that the guerrillas took over the offices. Most of them went to the army, that's where they are. I was in government in 1980. We inherited a modern British state, and we had to adhere to those standards. So, for example, no one came in with no requisite qualifications. We had Tumbuka and I had to spend weeks, hours certifying that Comrade Bina, although it doesn't have formal O-level, we can testify that he worked in the camps, he taught, he was a commander, and to get him to qualify to become a civil servant. That's what you do. So, as you know, most of the key positions at Independence were taken over by people who were qualified, like myself, who had been largely outside in the diaspora. It was a British civil service. So I really agree, but I get your point, that even then we should have given more regard to the need for technocrats. A few weeks ago, of last year, for example, some of us coined the National Transitional Authority. It was like an acknowledgement that the government had become moribund. I don't share your optimism. One thing is clear, the government did not become not only inefficient, become moribund. And we thought that there was no room for reform in that government, in the state. And that therefore we needed to set up something, a National Transition Authority, during which a group of Zimbabwean patriots and technocrats would redeem the country politically and economically for a period of 2 years before elections. It was a recognition that there is a serious problem in the state. And therefore, to answer your question, Mr. A lot, you don't be too euphoric about what has happened. There's a massive job to be done. This state is moribund at the moment. Okay? And we can only make the best of what has happened if we attend to those problems immediately. Regrettably, some of the problems are precisely those that have taken over the state. See? And we need a reform, a sector reform. I don't share your hope of coups every 5 years. We don't need that. It's retrogressive. I think we should look forward, and I hope that this new government, gives attention to the youth, young people, who are 65% of the population, who are the only skilled people there are. We have almost 4 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora. It shocked me, 70% of all professional skilled people are outside the country. 70% of people that we professionals are outside there. Does it not explain why the state is moribund? Does it not explain why the commercial sector is likewise almost moribund? There's a problem. So unless we attend to this 4 million and get most of them back as investors, to use the guy's term, as entrepreneurs, we are not going anywhere, period. 15 years from now, I can only see a bright Zimbabwe, especially if people like yourself who ask the question are in charge. I really hope that sooner or later your generation takes over. Why? Because I think we have seen the mess for which we are not responsible. People like I are responsible for this mess. We brought this state in 1980, and some of us are embarrassed to have been part of it. You have a capacity to learn from those mistakes. You know what mistakes have been made. More important, I think you know what needs to be done. You have no baggage. So take it. If the coup was done by people like yourself, your age group, I would have been very happy. Honestly. In other countries, coups are done by middle-level officers. Young colonels. Here they're done by people who should no longer be in government at all. That's the difference. Thank you.
Freedoms and material wealth. I think I would slightly deviate a little bit and put it this way. That I think you said what we need. I would say we need social movement in Africa. And Zimbabwe has a nucleus and the dots for the social movement, they just need connecting. Why do I feel it's a social movement? Because what we found ourselves is that the anti-colonial struggle, the social movement, the trade unions, the churches, the trades, the traders, everyone kind of rises up, the peasants. we want the colonial government gone. Council independence, we all go to the state. So the state becomes the only mechanism of doing anything, and there's no one to hold the state accountable. So we do require social movement to persist and continue to grow so that it can hold the state. And the best example I give is that I spent a lot of my time working with communities and projects. And I used to say, how is it I go to a community? And I'm not very villager, honest, never steals from anybody, never cheats anybody, never is considered the best person to resolve disputes, gets elected to become councillor. All of a sudden is corrupt. What has happened to this person? And the conclusion I came to is that the accountability mechanisms don't exist. At the village level, the mechanisms exist to hold this villager accountable. He becomes a councillor, there are no mechanisms that can do what I like. He will steal, or she will steal in the council, and she'll go back to the community and almost pretend and act like they never left the village. So for me, I think if you really want to argue, it's no longer a trade-off. It's actually the complementarity. We are gone beyond the stage of either freedoms to eat or freedom to speak. It is the world as it is today, and I think if you look at all the developmental states, they are all running into those difficulties because the citizens are demanding greater voice and greater accountability. So I think Zimbabwe is past that choice. I think it's about how do these two coexist, and therefore one of the things we hope that few of you are going to government and leave that to the politicians and the people who know the government, so that we have a strong social movement that can say, wait a minute, you promised us, which is why I'm going to come to the second question, Risa, you promised us 3 pillars of democracy, Mr. President. You promised us that you're going to sort out the land issue. You promised us you're going to do compensation in a fiscally sustainable way that doesn't destroy my business. We need you to continue to remind the president, and he will be the first one to admit that he needs to continue to remind him, these are the promises you made. We are with you, but we are with you as long as we are able to actually meet these promises between my freedoms to speak and my freedoms to act and trade and be actually around a farm. Therefore, 15 years from now, I see an empowered and a prosperous power. Because you are a small population, you have enormous resources, land, minerals, water, skills. And you seem to have avoided the path of violence and conflict, sadly in the post-independence period, which is a big blight in some of the most African countries. After independence, we become very violent, there's a lot of conflict, and therefore society to develop becomes impossible. So if you can be able to actually sort out the 2 things the president promised, at least from an economic perspective, he said, we'll sort out the land. Can I give you secure tenure? If you can give you secure tenure, and you're allowed to go and actually operate in the market, there is no reason why a Zimbabwean is able to actually exploit the mines on the land, be able to use the land on top, be able to trade nationally, regionally, internationally, not going to be very prosperous Zimbabwe. Can you compensate the white farm so that at least you remove the conflict to the 3rd generation? Because if we accept that in 1894 and 1930, the colonial administration took land by force from the Africans. In 2000, the African took land by force from the colony. Now you have the land because maybe you had power or you had access to authority. How is your grandson going to hold on to that land when your grandson is not the minister? Somebody will take the land from them by force. So you have an opportunity, and I think what the president said about compensation, it is more than compensation. It's compensation in a way that also handles the dispute management resolution systems, so that your son doesn't have to get land by taking by force from the grandson of the person who got the land because their father was a minister or had the powers and discovered it from the war. So for me, I think we have in what is being promised an agenda. 2 or 3 things. If you get them right, I would say you've got an incredibly bright and prosperous future. As an old man, I should be pessimistic, but I think I'm feeling actually very optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think these are powerful insights the future can only be bright. Allow me at this moment to thank the panelists, Dr. Mugai and Dr. Mandaza, for these very powerful insights and provoking our thinking as we think of how to take Zimbabwe forward. Thank you very much, and I think we can break for tea. Thank you.
Their organization. I was one of them, and I know the internal details of the disorganization. There was a conversation over the week which said the church has spoken. They've said to the politicians, it doesn't matter how we are going to stampede on each other, but this is what we want to see tomorrow as an output. Business said, no, we are not politicians, let's just watch, let's just see. You know, they can't meet together. Politicians, the compensation and collateral value of land amongst other things. So, I'm going to take a round of questions, and could I ask that?
It's really you're going to structure yourselves and become a low-cost producer in whatever currency, if you are going to be able to do that. And if you don't have those flexibilities, those are the flexibilities you ask for, but not to actually begin to make everybody think that by changing from the US dollar to the rand, our problems are going to be finished. They are not going to be finished. We have a solution for currency, and we'll be able to give it later on. We're asked, before I say whether we stand a chance or not, it's important for businesses to reform. It's absolutely important. That's why I say some of the things that will happen, some businesses will have to go. We have got international partners or donors. Let's also not, I can understand the intervention and so on, but these people come in and sometimes they actually destroy our businesses. So I'm not totally enthused by too much donor aid, which has got a significant impact, negative impact on our economy going forward. We saw it when we were in the inclusive government, when textbooks were bought from all the children and they were printed in India. It meant that our publishing business here actually was killed. And it also happens with medicines, that when we ask for medicines, and they all come from, some from India, some from far away, we actually kill our own industries. So I think when there is donations, one will have to look at it and say, what impact will it have? And therefore not simply be able to use donations as a significant policy for economic development. The chance of us making it, you know, the good thing is that President Mnangagwa has got the stage to show what he is made of. And so he can do all these things we are putting on the table and start to take this country forward. Because what we want, particularly us, is not that we should be in power for the sake of being in power. It's in power to meet the needs of the Zimbabwean people. If someone is meeting those needs, there is no need. I will be the first one to say that and acknowledge that it's being done. But if it's not done, that's where our chance is. So he is on notice, basically. Is he going to give us our freedoms? Yes or no? Is he going to make sure that the economy performs? Yes or no? And this time will tell. And in the short time, these issues are going to be resolved. If they are not, we are there as an alternative. But for CORD, one of the things that we have stood out totally different from others is that we do not subscribe to the one center of power. That there's too much power given to a president in our constitution. That this power has got to be revisited. We have already revisited it practically by taking away our proposals to take away all powers that can be used by a president to limit the freedoms of people to be reposed in Supreme Council. So that when the president fails to deliver on these things, he does not now turn up and say, you were talking and saying I failed, so I'm going to put you in prison. So we think that our chances are there, but the advantage that President Mnangagwa has got is he has got the stage. It's for him to lose. And we can all put bets whether he will win or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That we have had more government than governance for a long time. I think we need to deal with that. All right? I think it's very critical, and for those that are in the academia, let's deal with that. The second thing is that we've been too short-term in our planning. It's either 5 years or a second part of the second 5 years. Right now we're talking about Zima Asset. No. Zima Asset is only here since 2018. From the introduction of the quality currencies, 2009, we've had step 1, step 2, MTP, and so in essence, as business, we would have been asking questions, why are these policies not speaking to each other? Institutional reform. I think the biggest letdown to this country, our economic enablers. All those institutions, indicators we have deployed to be able to manage these institutions on behalf of the country have gone into self-aggrandizement process. If he is going to be retired, he is going to be retired with the heavy tax, being rewarded for mediocre performance. I think what has come out again is market economy. We need to ensure that we've facilitated business or economic activity. You know, too much control, you end up control what you can't. You can't control it all. I think we need to have confidence building measures as a last point from me. Confidence that gives certainty, that engenders innovation and creativity in all the spheres of life. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to provoke these gentlemen here and yourselves, and allow me to stand.
The role of the church in national unity and transformation. I would like both of you to answer that question. I think the first question had to do with the National People's Convention, which was actually a process we started some few days ago when we saw the change that was taking place, and there was a discord in interpreting what was going on from civil society. And as the church, we thought it is best that we bring together civil society so that we reflect together, find some shared narrative of what was going on. Then we had pre-conventions on the 23rd, and on the 24th we brought together about 4,000 people. The same day His Excellency was being inaugurated. What we think we needed to do, and I think this is ongoing right now, we are preparing for Bulawayo People's Convention, is that we need to continue creating space for national dialogue. Because while we are in this euphoria of everything seeming to be going well, we may lose sight of broader citizenship engagement on issues that are pressing. And we think that this should be the responsibility of the church to be driven by the desire for truth, and therefore creating platform for the nation to speak. If we are going to have national transformation and healing, you cannot avoid to revisit the issue of truth of what happened in the past and how we try to avoid some of the negative heads of the past from repeating.
I would also say that in regard to the church's positioning itself, we have to remain as apolitical. And too often we're having pastors and churches, some immature, but some of the newer sects becoming active and involved in the politics of the nation. And endorsing or not endorsing or prophesying and doing all kinds of things. That is not the position of the church. The church is an amoral voice that represents the kingdom of God and speaks to power and speaks to the nation. It is separate from the power of the state. It cannot be controlled by the state, nor should it be regulated directly by the state, other than in the affairs of its function as it responds to its finances and things like that, like any other institution. But when it comes to being a voice, we have to have an independent voice, and we should not be endorsing unless it violates our correction is if it violates moral law. If it violates the law of God, we will speak out. We will speak out on the issues. But we cannot support a singular party, nor can we support a singular entity, a person or a president. And I think that's where we morally gone astray sometimes. But the church has to return to that if we're going to be a voice and then speak truth to power and speak truth into the nation of what God's tenets are, and support as much as we can the rule of law and the Constitution of Zimbabwe.
Surely it took both of you so long for Baba Mkonori to feature on the surface. He could have done that 10 years ago, when people were killed in the streets, people were butchered in 2008, and the church could have risen at that point in time. The church was silent. To 80%, by the rules of statistics, 80%, like you both said, are Christians. So in the Parliament of Zimbabwe, 80% are your members. In cabinet, 80% are your members. In the presidium, 80% are your members. In prime secretaries, in business and other, 80% are members of the church. Well, so why is the church not salt and light when it's 80% in the church, in the congregations, and not 8% in governments?
You're going to go 10 minutes here just now. I'd like to address that. And the problem lies not with the church in particular. It lies in the disconnected business people in particular, politicians in particular have. They're Christians on Sundays, and the rest of the week they're doing business and they're doing politics. They have not yet transmigrated. They haven't taken their faith and instituted it in their lives. And so what we do, it's very comfortable to leave the church as the scapegoat, just like we do in everything else in this country. It's never our fault. It's always the West, the East, the North, the South. It's always somebody else's fault, and no one takes their rightful place. And business has the biggest burden to bear. Because why didn't business stand up together when you can control the economy of the nation, and you never said a word either? So you point the finger at the church. I'll tell you what, you need to point the finger at all of ourselves. We need to say we never stood up as a nation. Why? Because we were more interested in self and selfishness and taking care of ourselves, take care of me, Jack, and we didn't take care of our nation. And if we continue the same path we're on, you can go back and I can tell you, we'll have exactly the same problem, because we're not going to change this nation unless we change our hearts. And only God can do that. And yes, pastors need to help their people become voices and not echoes. We have to help our people renew their minds and live the life of Christ in the marketplace. You're the ministers of the gospel, not the pastors. God said that we're to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And if you're a saint, you have a responsibility in your domain to bring about transformation for good for all men.
And the reason why I raise this question, what we need is to have empowered Christianity. Christianity that is not compartmentalized. Christianity that is holistic, that sees itself as the salt and the light wherever we are stationed. And I think this dichotomization of life, where there is a spiritual side and then the secular life, I think as he has put aptly, is a result of trying to find convenience. If we are going to be true disciples, I think the church will need to carry the cross and enable its members to carry the cross 24/7 and 7 days a week. And I think the church needs to change its mode. And I'm glad that we are talking about the new era. This new era should not only be in politics. It must also mean a change in our theology. A theology of the cross, not a theology of glory. I want Mr. Mongoma.
Thank you. I think the issue of mindset, and I mentioned it, is absolutely key. So first, when you look at the leaders, you've got to have a mindset of serving, not of being served. So when you are seeking public office, it is not your time to eat, but your time to serve. If you go in with a mentality to eat, we are not going to change this path. So some of us have clearly taken the issue that our mindset is to go and serve. And therefore we must be seen, not only to talk about changing a mindset, but to live it. So when we talk of servant leadership, we must be seen to be servant leaders. As I was going out, I was told to sit, and I sat. Otherwise I would have gone to say I'm too important. But also when we talk about the mindset, it's for us to be able to know that this Zimbabwe is ours. I'm now coming from, it's ours. There is no first-class citizen, there is no second-class citizen.
Right.
So the rights that a politician has got, the mate has got as well. So everyone's voice must be listened to, and everyone is important. And I'm glad that the church is here, because a person is both spiritual and the body. And it becomes important for us not only to treat the body, but the spirit, which is absolutely equal for everyone. So you either be able to be good enough to enter the kingdom of heaven, or you are not. But when we are here, we must be able to respect each other. And then the culture of fear needs to go. Yeah, because sometimes you have to tell yourself, I can speak truth to power and nothing will happen to me. Well, I know we used to speak truth to power and we were beaten thoroughly. But you should not give up because of it. That's why we are where we are. People express that they want freedom. Let's continue to claim that space. So that if indeed we say it's a new era, we must see the difference between the old era and the new era. If it's not there, we must now be able to go and say, guess what? You are doing exactly what you were doing before, which we don't want. There will be a new government in place. And that is where the mindset, we've got to continuously working on it. And I like the last thing, just about what must we be known for. Zimbabweans are selfish. We are selfish. We need to be able to say, no, who knew? You are because I am. So together, we must be all right. And therefore, we must take care of each other. And as a society, we should start to care once more. Because I know we used to care. Some of us were brought up by the whole village. And that's why when we try to give back to society, it's because I know it wasn't my mother and father who looked after me to be where I am. And we should be able to do the same. I thank you.